What was your favourite goal of yours today out of the three?
I liked all of the forwards.
But if there is one man who City can rely on, it is yourself. Look, 3 goals today, back-to-back hat-tricks, 7 goals in just 3 matches. How do you assess your start to the season?
It's been quite good.
There goes Haaland, he's on his way again, he's hungry, he's scored, he always does, he always will. Nothing more certain that Erling Haaland would slap his name across this game.
There is a version of this story where Erling Haaland is just a freak of nature, good genes, good luck, good timing. That version is comfortable. It's also wrong. The real story is about a player who has been doubted, mocked, statistically picked apart, and questioned at literally every single stage of his career, and somehow keeps scoring through every bit of it.
Erling Haaland will not live up to the expectation. I am so bored.
Why won't he?
Because he isn't the player that everybody thinks he is. People are saying that he's going to win the Golden Boot. That is outrageous. It's so disrespectful to the establishment.
Why is that?
To turn up in a new league and win the Golden Boot. That would be a ridiculous achievement, and he isn't going to do it.
But to understand why none of it has worked, we have to go back to before anyone outside Norway even knew his name. He didn't arrive at Dortmund as a finished product. Before that, he was a teenager scoring an almost unbelievable goal for Red Bull Salzburg, the kind of numbers that get dismissed as Austrian league stats, inflated, not real. The doubts followed him out of Austria immediately, too direct, too physical. Dortmund didn't care what the doubters thought. They handed him the shirt anyway, and almost immediately, the questions changed shape. It wasn't, is he good enough for this level, anymore. It became, how is a teenager doing this? What happened next should have ended the conversation completely. He helped tear apart RB Leipzig in a German Cup final and finished his time in Dortmund with 86 goals in just 89 appearances overall. 86 goals, 89 games, numbers that, for most strikers, would represent a career highlight reel, not a single stop on the way somewhere bigger. That number alone should have silenced any debate. It didn't. Because the next stop wasn't Dortmund anymore, it was Manchester City, under a manager who, for years, had been famous for not wanting a player like him at all. Pep Guardiola's entire footballing philosophy was built on movement, rotation, false nines who could drop into midfield and combine. Haaland was the opposite of that idea, a battering ram of a number 9 who lived inside the penalty box and barely touched the ball outside it. Pundits openly questioned whether the two would ever actually fit together, whether City's identity would have to bend completely just to accommodate one player. This is where the real criticism starts, and it's worth sitting with because it never actually went away, it just kept finding new ammunition every single season. Former Manchester United captain Roy Keane called him League Two standard, and Jamie Carragher described him as a world-class finisher, but not a world-class player, calling him the ultimate luxury footballer. Think about how strange that sentence actually is. The best goal scorer in the league in the same breath, being called a luxury, as if scoring goals was somehow the lesser part of being a striker. The accusation was always the same shape, no matter who was making it. Haaland scores, sure, but he doesn't do anything else. He doesn't link play. He doesn't drop deep to collect the ball. He doesn't create chances for his teammates the way a complete forward should. Pundits even started counting his touches like detectives building a case, pointing out he averaged far fewer touches per game than forwards like Harry Kane or Kylian Mbappe. 740 touches across 34 games. Compare that to Kane's 1,295 touches in a similar sample or Mbappe's nearly 1,700. On paper, it looked damning. It looked like proof that Haaland was somehow incomplete, a finisher bolted onto a team rather than woven into it. For a while, it genuinely looked like that criticism might stick for good. And then someone with actual insider knowledge of striker coaching pointed out something the stat counters had completely missed. Wayne Rooney revealed that his old manager, Louis van Gaal, used to demand exactly that from his strikers, 15 to 20 touches a game, nothing more, because the job was never to be involved constantly, it was to finish the moment the ball arrived. Haaland wasn't malfunctioning. He wasn't failing to adapt to City's system. He was doing precisely what the position has always demanded from its purest practitioners, just with more ruthless efficiency than almost anyone in modern football history. But the nickname stuck anyway. They started calling him the Robot. And the joke, like most jokes that survive for years, was built on something that was at least partly true. A New York Times journalist described him as having a robotic reputation, saying he scores like a machine, then almost seems to power down until the next match. The framing was almost always the same, emotionless, mechanical, a player so consistent he barely registered as human. Haaland eventually stopped fighting the joke and basically confirmed it himself, leaning into the Nordic robot persona that fans and pundits had built around him for years. Robot celebrations, deadpan press conferences. A complete refusal to engage emotionally with criticism that would have buried a more sensitive player in self-doubt years earlier. Here's the part most people miss. Being called a robot was supposed to be an insult. For Haaland, it turned into the explanation for everything that followed. A robot doesn't get rattled by Roy Keane going on television and calling him League Two standard. A robot doesn't lose form because a respected former defender labels him a luxury rather than a complete footballer. A robot simply repeats the same movement, the same run, the same finish, match after match, regardless of who's watching or what they think they've spotted wrong with his game. And when you strip away all the noise, that exact consistency is what makes him almost impossible to actually stop for any extended period. So when 2022 arrived and people said the Premier League, supposedly faster, more physical, more tactically ruthless than the Bundesliga, would finally expose him, he didn't slow down even slightly. He broke the single-season Premier League goal record in his very first year in England, doing it in a league that had spent decades building a reputation for chewing up foreign strikers who couldn't adapt. Then came the next wave of criticism, the more dangerous kind, because it didn't come from a pundit with a personal axe to grind or a soundbite to sell. It came from data, from coaches, from genuine tactical analysis. Analysts pointed out he'd gone goalless across several straight starts at one stretch, suggesting a real lack of variety in his game, and noted that elite defenders like William Saliba had begun nullifying him almost completely by sitting deep and refusing to let him run in behind. For the first time in his career, there was an actual blueprint circulating among Europe's best defensive coaches. Mark him tight, don't sit off and let him sprint into space. Make him a complete non-factor by denying him the one type of service his entire game was built around. It worked. For a few games at a time, it genuinely worked. Real Madrid, with Antonio Rudiger physically dominating him in a Champions League quarter-final, restricted him to barely 20 touches in an entire match. It has never worked for a full season, not once, because even when one specific game plan shuts him down completely, the next opponent doesn't have Saliba, doesn't have Rudiger, doesn't have the personnel or the discipline to repeat it for 90 minutes. And Haaland only needs one mistake, one half chance, one moment where the blueprint slips for even a second. Which brings the story to now, to a stage even bigger than the Premier League, the one tournament that had always been conspicuously missing from his resume. Norway hadn't reached a men's World Cup in almost 3 decades. An entire generation of Norwegian fans had grown up never watching their country compete on football's biggest stage, and there was a real, lingering fear that Haaland's career might end the same way, a brilliant individual story with no major international tournament attached to it at all. He made sure that drought ended on his own terms, and he didn't make it close. 16 goals in only 8 qualifying games dragged Norway to the World Cup outright, setting up what became one of the most anticipated individual matchups of the entire group stage.
To qualify for the first time in 28 years and going through the group stage, yes, I would say so.
Then once the tournament itself began, the doubts briefly resurfaced one more time. Could he actually replicate club form on the international stage against defenses that had an entire tournament cycle to specifically study him? He scored 2 goals in his World Cup debut against Iraq, then added 2 more against Senegal just days later, putting him on 4 goals through his opening 2 matches of the tournament. 4 goals in 2 games against 2 completely different defensive systems on the tournament's biggest stage. whatever lingering question marks existed about whether this version of Haaland could turn up when it mattered most evaporated almost instantly. And the most dangerous part for every defense left in the competition isn't even the goals themselves. He looks like he's having more fun than anyone else at the entire tournament.
And let's be happy every single Norwegian on the planet today.
A robot that's also visibly enjoying itself, smiling through pre-match press conferences, casually waving away pressure instead of absorbing it, is the single hardest version of Haaland for any coaching staff to prepare for. So why will he never stop scoring? Go back through every single criticism leveled at him across his entire career. Too direct as a teenager, a poor tactical fit for Guardiola's system, too few touches, too robotic, too easily nullified by elite individual defenders for short stretches. And notice, the one thing none of it has ever actually managed to prove. Not a single pundit who has ever built a case against him has ever successfully argued that when the ball arrives at his feet inside the penalty box, he doesn't score. Every other criticism is really just a description of his style, dressed up as a weakness. The one number that has never moved across Salzburg, across Dortmund, across Manchester City, across an entire World Cup campaign, is the only number that was ever actually going to decide this argument. That's the one thing that's never been in dispute. And as long as it isn't, the criticism will keep finding new shapes, new stats, new nicknames, new tactical blueprints that work for exactly 1 or 2 matches before quietly disappearing again. And Haaland will keep doing the only thing that's ever actually mattered through all of it, arriving on schedule exactly where the goal needs him to be.